Welcome to We Have Issues, special 9/11 edition, where we examine important issues dealing with the events of 9/11. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Today, we welcome City of New York FDNY retired battalion commander Jack Oehm, who is a current board member of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. As an off-duty battalion chief, Oehm first arrived at Ground Zero after both the North and South Towers of the World Trade Center had collapsed on 9/11. It became evident early in Ohm's life that he was a leader. This fact has been documented by Monsignor Farrell High School's Hall of Fame website. It is noted that Oehm was a class vice president, served as an usher, and was a member of the National Honor Society back in his days in Oakwood. But his chief passion was running. A highly accomplished four-year member of the cross-country and track teams, he was elected track captain in his senior year. Following his graduation from Farrell in 1976, Jack earned a degree in accounting from Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. He joined the FDNY shortly afterward, accumulating several honors during his distinguished career. Eventually, he found himself at the scene of 9/11. This veteran of 32 years with the FDNY recalls that one of his saddest memories upon arriving at the scene of 9/11 was hearing the sound of the PASS, or Personal Alert Safety System, PASS. The alarms were sounding on the firefighters' equipment, signaling distress. Oehm struggled with knowing that the citizens and rescue workers were trapped with rescue efforts unable to reach them. The rescue workers mounted the pile of rubble and by hand until heavy machinery reached the scene. Upon finding a fallen firefighter or a police officer, the unit they belonged to was called to the scene to identify and carry out the victims. Unfortunately, Oehm lost more than 20 of his battalion colleagues. Moreover, 3 of his 9 units never came home. Grieving with the widows and families of his fallen colleagues was extremely difficult for Oehm. City of New York FDNY retired battalion commander and current Tunnel to Towers Foundation board member Jack Oehm, thank you for joining us for this episode of We Have Issues 9/11 Special Edition today.
Well, Joe, thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. My pleasure and honor to be with you today.
Commander, what motivated you to pursue a career with the FDNY?
Well, when I was a little kid, I was always excited to, see the fire trucks go by and with their lights and sirens on. And I guess most of the little boys, from 3 to 5 was, whatever age that is, gets excited about, the big truck with the strong fireman on it and going to help people. And I always had it in me to help people. And that's why I'm part of this foundation. And that's why I do a lot of other things that I do in my life. I'm on the board of directors of 4 not-for-profits. So I like to help people. It's in me. It's always been in me. So since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be a fireman. I had a fireman visit my school at one time and just he brought the equipment, the helmet, the coat, and, just excited to see it. And then what really cemented my determination to be a New York City fireman was in my track career as a freshman running track for Monsignor Farrell High School. One of my friends, Tommy Selleck, was running track with me, and his brother was a New York City firefighter who was also a track guy from Monsignor Farrell, but he was 8, 9 years older than us. So he would, when he was off from the fire department, he would come and coach track and be our freshman track coach, not every day of the week because he had to work a couple of days. And Marty Selleck, Tommy's brother, was a great guy, and he used to drive us around places and talk about the job. And so I just cemented. Unfortunately, Marty Selleck died in a fire in the summer of July of '77. He died. Went out a fifth-story window trying to jump to a towel ladder bucket that he couldn't see because the smoke was so thick. Marty fell 5 stories, died a couple of days later. And I went to the funeral as a freshman and now in college. and just the seeing these firemen paying the respects of their fallen comrade, just cemented that feeling in me to become a New York City fireman. So I'm glad I made that decision. I'm glad I was able to take the test. I did go to college, as you mentioned, because back in the 70s, the city was going broke. And my father said, listen, you got to have a backup plan. You can't just, if the city goes broke, they lay off firemen, which they did. And you can't rely on the city's job market back then, So I went to college, always good at math. I got a degree in accounting and never used that degree, but that's okay.
The fact that you talk about this with such pride, I think is important for all of our listeners and for me as well. I listen to you and I hear someone who is committed to making a difference. And that's something that unfortunately gets forgotten in today's world. We tend to want instant gratification and instant results. To be a firefighter and to be a good firefighter takes a lot of training, and it takes a lot of time at a firehouse, maybe where not much is going on, but you need to be ready every second of every day because you don't know what faces you in the future. So I salute you for that.
Oh, thank you, Joe. And I always tell my kids, and I tell people all the time, you have to have passion for what you do. If you just, like we talked before, if you're just going through the motions and that's not living, that's not, fulfilling your job as a person in society. Have passion for what you do, love what you do, or find something that you're going to love to do.
We say often, thank you for your service to our military servicemen and women, and they deserve that. But I think when we see firemen, when we see sanitation men, when we see teachers, when we see people who are really committed to their service, to their opportunity to make a difference, I'd like to see us more often say thank you.
Yeah.
Because those are deserved.
100% right. My wife was an elementary school teacher, and one of the best sayings I've ever saw, people like, oh, what do you make? How much money do you make? And the best thing you could say is, I make a difference. You make a difference in somebody's life.
Truer words were never spoken. Let me ask you a question about 9/11 more specifically. You received the news of the attack on 9/11. And when you hear this news, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I think like everybody else, I was home off duty, going about my daily routine. And I heard it on the radio, WCBS News Radio 880, which I listened to. And it was just, well, it has to be a small little plane, a Cessna, maybe, two-seater. Somebody just messed up and flew into the World Trade Center. I think most people had that same feeling with the initial report.
When we found out it was different, it was devastating to the entire nation, and we went into a mode that we don't see very often. So it's difficult at that point to keep your concentration on your job when you're in such a new situation. And that's another opportunity to be grateful for the folks who were at the scene, because you couldn't worry about what was going on around you. You needed to do your job and do it to the best of your ability.
100%, Joe, 100%. And, that's what firemen do. I mean, firemen want to help people. I've never seen a group of people. My hardest job as a battalion chief was to get my people out of the fire building when I thought it was too dangerous for them, because they would give me every excuse in a book to stay in and say, Chief, we got it. We could do this. We're going to put it out. We're going to get these people. And that was my hardest job, because these firemen, they want to do good. They want to help people. And just a unique group of people a group of mostly men when I was there that want to help people and do their job. And we saw that on 9/11. We saw that with Steven Silla running through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, with 60 pounds of gear on his back. We saw that with other firemen who were off duty that were going, they could have went home to their families, but they stayed and jumped on a fire truck that was responding to the World Trade Center so they could help their brothers and help those civilians that needed help that morning. So, I mean, just, and the police did the same thing, and EMS and nurses and the doctors that were there that, just amazing response to that day. Just amazing.
Everybody has a different reaction to things when they occur. Could you please give our listeners an idea of what it felt like to approach the towers and see the mass destruction that was taking place, the devastation that maybe we had never seen before?
Yeah, Joe, that was an amazing scene. So real that, it boggles my mind that what I was seeing and what I knew what existed there before were two different things. One was total destruction of these 110-story office buildings. Just, two different piles of debris, and the eerie quietness of the whole area, except for those pass alarms that you spoke about before, those pass alarms going off. And we knew those firemen were trapped along with the civilian population. And then all this white, almost dust was coming down from the sky, ash and papers that were burning. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, it was almost like I had to pinch myself. I said, is this really true? Am I dreaming this? Could this really happen to us? Because, we weren't at war per se at the time. We knew 93 bombing and we knew of terrorists back then. But, for this to happen to a civilian target, beyond belief.
Now, there are a lot of us who've seen media footage only, and I don't believe have any real concept of that devastation that was being witnessed and the challenges that were both physical and psychological that you and your fellow rescue workers were experiencing firsthand at the World Trade Center. So were there any ways that the rescuers would be able to maintain their own focus? Were there little things that they would do because they were struggling to rescue those who were trapped or worse under the rubble, yet they couldn't just be overwhelmed by this devastation? So how were they able to do their jobs?
Well, Joe, when you're in the thick of things, just like the military, just like a football player, you're in the zone. You are in that zone and you have a focus to do the job, to get the job done, under any circumstances. And that's, everybody said, oh, you got a great job. Before 9/11, I knew it was the best job in the world. After 9/11, people realized what first responders did for them day in and day out. And then they realized, hey, these guys do a good job and they should be respected. But I knew that before going into the job. I knew what they did. And on that day and the 9 months that we stayed on a pile and later on into the pit when we dug out the basements, we were just doing our job, Joe. And we would do it again. And I think if you could go back and ask those 343 firefighters that died, the 37 Port Authority police officers that died, and the 23 New York City police officers that died that morning, if they would do it again, they would say yes. And that's the kind of men and women that we have in our first responders, and that's the kind of men and women we have in our military. So losing focus is not a question. Did those people storming the beaches, those men storming the beaches on June 6th, did they lose their focus? No, they had a job to do. They had the job to take those beaches, knock out those pillboxes, knock out the Germans out of their bunkers, and take the bridges and take the roads so they can make an inroad to Normandy, into France, so that we could defeat Nazi Germany. And that's what they did. And we did our job. And I'm proud of the firemen and the police officers and all first responders that did their job that day and then 9 months later.
Addressing the issue at the World Trade Center was a devastating challenge to all who were there. And it would have been impossible had it not been for the assistance from rescue workers who came from across the country to contribute to this rescue effort. How did this action of these people generously coming from miles and miles and states and parts of the country far away to help with this rescue, what effect did that have on the morale of the local rescue teams?
Well, that had a great effect on our morale. I mean, you can imagine the joy of seeing, and I have a great story that I tell when I have time and when I'm speaking about 9/11 to other people, and I'll tell you folks in a second. But, it had a great effect on us, Joe. Like, it was help. It was help from all over the country. And we go to a restaurant bar right by the World Trade Center. And, you should come up and see it one day, Joe. But it's O'Hara's Bar. And they have patches from all different fire departments, police department, EMS units, all over the walls, up on a ceiling. It has to be thousands of patches from all units that came to help us. And one of my stories that I love to tell is my first day there. I told you I got there after the second tower collapsed. And, we climbed up to the top and we started digging. And hours went by and hours, and we're getting depressed, tired, exhausted. Now about 12 hours into my day, probably the morning of 9/12, the fire department just decided that we're going to work 24 hours on, 24 hours off. That was going to be our work schedule. So that Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, I was due back into the firehouse. So I said, I have to relieve myself off the pile and get some rest. But before I walked down, as I looked down at the base of the pile, I saw a group of firefighters marching in formation up to my area on the top of the pile. And I said to myself, these are not New York City firefighters, because we don't do anything in formation. And these guys got up to my position on a pile, gave me a big salute, said, Chief, we're here to help you. What can we do for you? I can't tell you the emotions that overcame me at that moment. I hugged the guy. I probably kissed the guy. I said, where are you from? And how'd you get here? Because we knew they grounded all the flights. And I forget what town. It was a small town in eastern Tennessee. And they told me, they said, Chief, when we saw the towers get hit, when we saw the towers come down, we got into our cars and drove up to New York City to help their brothers in our time of need. That's a beautiful story, Joe. I get the goosebumps telling that story. And that was, I tell people, this is the goodness of America. This is the goodness of America I saw for those 9 months that I was on a pile and later on into the pit. And people don't know that. This is what we should focus on. The media, and I'm not bashing the media, but I think they portray only our bad side most of the time and not the goodness of America. And that's what we need to remember, the goodness of America.
As horrible as 9/11 was, it also did what you say it did. It brought us together. And politics was set aside, thankfully. I know that there's politics in the world, and yes, we have it in today's world as well. But when politics can be put aside for the goodness of the country, right, for the welfare of the country, that's as important as anything. And hopefully that's a lesson that we can be reminded of by those events in 9/11 and the subsequent heroism. We never want to see those horrible events again, but that heroism exists in every aspect of life in this day and age. And Jack, I agree with you. We need to look at that a lot more and look at the differences maybe a little less to try to find similarities and common goals.
100%, Joe.
Now, I understand that there were rescue dogs who took a very strong role in the 9/11 rescue. How exactly were they used?
So the rescue dogs, there were two different types. One was what they call cadaver dogs, where they were just searching for, unfortunately, decomposing bodies. And, dogs can smell so much more than humans. So they were a great help in the later stages. The first couple of days when we're still looking for survivors, and that's a different type of dog. And they were great. I mean, just the amount of help that we had from all different types of people, all different types of animals. I mean, the dogs were terrific to see. They were a mood. They uplifted your mood when you saw them. You could come up and pet them, and just just petting a dog makes everybody, I think, feel better. So they gave us a psychological boost, and they were great helping us find any survivors. Unfortunately, there weren't that many survivors to find, but later on, in finding, where the bodies were trapped beneath the steel and concrete, so that we would know where to focus our search and rescue efforts. The dogs were indispensable for us, and just a great tool to help us, finding bodies.
Now, Tunnels to Towers does some tremendous work. And I guess the question to ask, first of all, would be, what was the impetus for creating Tunnel to Towers?
So we have to thank the Silla family. We have to thank Frank and his two brothers and his three sisters. Stephen was the baby of 7, and he was orphaned. His dad died when he was 8, and his mom died when he was 10. So he was orphaned at 10 years old, and there was 14 years between Frankie and Stephen, and so Stephen was a miracle. And his parents were on the old side to have a kid back then. And, the 3 brothers and 3 sisters raised Stephen since he was 10 years old. And, I always say not only did they lose a brother, they felt like they lost a son, because you're raising a kid at 10 years old. He's a son to you, in my opinion. So, instead of cursing and getting upset, and I'm sure they were, but they did something about it. They made something terrible into something good by creating this foundation so that we would honor and remember those 2,977 Americans that were murdered that morning, that we would never forget them and their sacrifice. They created this foundation to do good. And like I tell people, we've been doing good for almost 23 years now, and I'm so happy to be a small part of it.
I know there's a tremendous amount being done by Tunnel to Towers, and those of us who know the work being done are extraordinarily grateful. And those who may not necessarily be aware of all the work that's being done are hopefully silently grateful as well. Would you please tell us specifically about some of the work that's being done by Tunnel to Towers?
Sure. We have 4 major programs. I would put them into 4 categories. Our smart home program is where we build smart homes. All these homes have technology that men and women that are catastrophically injured in the service of our nation, or now we even build smart homes for catastrophically injured first responders, so that they can live an independent life. So these homes have so much technology in them that they can get a glass of water for themselves. They can cook. The stovetops will come down. If they're in a wheelchair, the stovetop will come down so they can actually cook on a stovetop. Like I said, get a glass of water. They can take a shower. They can go to the bathroom, clean themselves. All of this gives these great men and women dignity back to their lives, where they don't have to rely on a caretaker to do things that we take for granted day in and day out. So we built smart homes all over the country for catastrophically injured servicemen and women. And we just started to do that for our first responders because we noticed that firefighters and police officers are getting catastrophically injured, and they need these smart homes so that they can live an independent life. I think as of today, we probably have about 220 of these done throughout the country, and building 30, 40 a year, each and every year for our servicemen and women and our first responders. We also have a program, what we call a fallen first responder program, where we pay off mortgages for families of firefighters, police officers, EMS workers, any first responder that dies in a line of duty with a young family. We come in and we take that financial burden off their shoulders by paying off their mortgage for them so that they can live in that house, in that home that their spouse built with them, so they don't have to move and leave those memories, and they have one less thing to worry about. Of course, we can't replace their loved one that died in a line of duty, but we can ease their financial burden. So our Fallen First Responder program, it does that for these true American heroes. Our third program is our Gold Star Family Program, where these families have made the supreme sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice. Their husbands, their wives, their brothers, their sisters, their sons, their daughters have given their lives in the service of this country so that you and me can be free, so that you and me can live in the greatest country the world has ever seen. So we pay off their mortgages for their families. So again, that they could stay in that home and stay in that forever home, and not have that financial burden of worrying about who and how am I going to pay off the mortgage. And our fourth program is our largest and most recent programs, just started in January of 2022, where we're going to eradicate homelessness among our veteran population. And when I speak out in the public, I always tell people that in 2022, there was around 40,000 homeless veterans in this country. And to me, that's a crying shame. And, you know, I love my country, Joe. I don't think anybody loves their country more than me. I love America, but I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed of my government. And I'm not taking sides here. Both sides are to blame. Both sides are to blame. To have 40,000 homeless veterans. These guys, we should be taking care of them. And a foundation under Frank Sulla's leadership has started this program 2 years ago. I'm happy to report about 4,000 veterans are off the street because of our program. And what this program does, we renovate hotels all over the country, 3-, 4-story hotels. On the first level of the hotel, we give them all the supportive services that they need: mental health counseling, drug addiction counseling, alcohol counseling, job training, job placement. We have a nurse 24 hours 7 on premise, and the second, third, or fourth floor, if they do have them, we are renovating those hotel rooms into apartment efficiencies. So these guys have a place to lay their heads down at night. They get fed, they eat, they get counseling if they need it, they go off to work, and we want to bring them back into society to become productive members of society once again, because we sent them off to fight our battles. Now they're fighting their battles, and we're going to help them win those battles and get them back into society. So, I mean, those are major programs, and just so many people we're helping, and I'm so proud, like I said before, to be part of this great foundation.
Jack, sometimes people have initiatives, programs that they favor a little bit more than others. Is there one of those programs that's maybe a little closer to your heart than the others?
Well, Joe, you know, being a New York City fireman for 32 years, I have to say the Fallen First Responder program is near and dear to my heart. In fact, this morning I just got 2 emails from people that run golf outings for us out in the St. Louis area. They lost 2 firefighters out there, 2 separate incidents, and they just emailed me, what can we do? And I forward them on to our program managers, and we investigate, we find out, make sure it's line of duty. make sure they fit all our criteria, and then they make a decision on paying off the mortgages. So, I would have to say the Fallen First Responder Program, obviously coming from my background, is the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart.
If someone in our listening audience, or even not in our listening audience, but can hear from someone who's with us today, if they wish to donate their time to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation instead of maybe making a monetary donation, are there options for them to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like we have across the country, we have 3,000 what we call third-party events, where people call our foundation and say, listen, I want to run a golf outing. I want to do a stair climb. I want to have a run, a 5K run. I want to do a bocce tournament. I want to, whatever they want to do. We have a guy in Atlanta swimming. He swims 15 miles for us every 9/11 and raises $30,000
That's great.
for us. Yeah, one guy, and he gets donors, he gets people. So there are so many things, so many ways to volunteer. And if you want to raise money for us, there's so many. I mean, pickleball is big now. We have pickleball events. We have clay shooting events. Just amazing. If you like to do something and that's your passion, we say go out and do it. And if you could raise a little bit of money for us, that's a great thing for us. So yes, there's plenty of things to do if you don't have the capacity to give us monetary donations. And what Frank always asks for, we ask for $11 a month. If you can do that, $11 a month, we feel most people, not a lot of people, can sacrifice. In New York, $11 is probably one beer nowadays.
Maybe a cup of coffee or tea.
Yeah.
Now, we've taken up a lot of your time, and I appreciate you taking that time. But I'd like to ask you one more question. What message would you like to have our listeners take away from this conversation that we've had?
So, like you said before, Joe, that we have to, we have more in common as a nation than we have differences. And we need leadership to bring us together, and leadership, sometimes we don't get the best leaders. But having said that, we have to recognize that we are the shining light for the rest of the world. And if we fail, there's going to be bad actors that are going to run things, and it's not going to be a pretty situation, just in my opinion. So we got to remember that we are the United States of America. We have the best military men and women fighting for our freedoms day in and day out. We have great first responders in this country. Are we perfect? No, we do make mistakes, but we have people that are willing to die for you and for me. And these are the people, these are the heroes of America. It's not the athletes, it's not the movie stars. They're great athletes. They got great, skills. They can move us to tears acting, but they're not heroes. Our true American heroes are our military men and women and our first responders. And we got to always remember and say thank you to them for what they do day in and day out for our country.
Your wisdom surely fits your mission, Jack, and you're a hero to many, and it's well-deserved.
Thank you, Joe. I don't feel a hero. I do my job, and it's a job I love to do. And I'm sorry I'm retired. I got hurt, and I miss it every day. But it is the greatest job in the world, and you got to have it you have to do your job with passion. That's for sure.
Agreed. City of New York FDNY retired battalion commander and board member of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, Jack Oehm. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to visit with us today on We Have Issues Special 9/11 Edition. I'm sure that our listening audience is most grateful for the information and the insight you have provided for us about 9/11 and the work of the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. May God continue to bless you and the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, its members and its supporters, as well as the families of all who lost their lives on 9/11.
Thank you, Joe. God bless America.
Well, that concludes this episode of We Have Issues Special 9/11 Edition, where we examine important issues dealing with the events of 9/11. I'm your host, Joe Pizzo. Have a wonderful day.